Today I'm going to talk to you about our peasant weapons of the Dark Ages. I realise this covers a large area, but whenever we think of Saxons or Vikings, see them with their magnificent helms, their flaming swords and blah de blah de blah. But the reality is the majority of the army were poor people who were fighting for their own land. So you're an ordinary peasant farmer, you've got very little in the way of wealth, you may even be a slave still, or you just come out from that. So what do you do to defend your land? Well, a pointy stick. Now this in itself doesn't seem much, but you imagine a long-ish stick, sharpened to a point and fire hardened. Now the origin of the spear, there's an excellent video out by Stefan Marlowe who goes into the history of the spear far more than I am able to do. So as I say, have a look at that. And I have not, oh right, yeah, here's a very primitive example. This got mushroom end on it, so now you just sharpen it, stick it in a fire, let it burn, and then keep it there, get the flames out. Now another thing you can do is join a club. This is just basically a tree root. You could dig it off, and there's nothing subtle about this. Just you can shatter heads with this, or you could do a lot of damage with it. In other words, it keeps you alive. Here's its little brother, a clubette. There you go. Again, just an ordinary piece of wood, fettled. It's effective, it works, and yeah, it keeps you alive again. Or maybe even something like that. Doesn't look much, but you get a face full of that, you've got big trouble. In fact, look, it's eyes. But if you're in a fight and this is all you've got, you're going to use it. You've seen the deers of the forest using these, and this could keep you alive. Or a nice old hammer. This one's made of wood. Simple enough, get a log, bore a hole, get another stick, wham it through. You've got protection. In my past as an archaeologist, we dug a cemetery, and there was one particular skeleton that stood out for me. From the knee to the ankle, he had 18 separate spear wounds which had healed, and that tells me that he was a man of lowly status, and basically to get to the people who are worth money and worth ransoming, you get rid of the people. You don't want to kill them, because when you've taken their land, you want them to work the land for you. If they're dead, they can't do that. So in the legs, down he goes, and off you go to get this lordship. That's not a good place to be on the floor in a battlefield, because they also had big dogs who they kept hungry, hence let loose the dogs of war. So you're laying there, you can't move very well, and this great big dog comes up. He's not saying hello to you, he's looking at you for dinner. But there was a hard, brutal life on both sides of the fence, so you used whatever weaponry you could, even down to fists. Now I have heard, I haven't seen personally, but they excavated Anglo-Saxon graves and found a wooden pot on the head of one of the bodies. Again, that sounds a bit weird, but if that's all you've got to protect your head, you stick it on. Helmets were very, very expensive. We get blasé about it. A helmet is said to be worth the price of a house, and as for a sword, well, you dream of it, but you would never own one. You'd never be allowed to touch one, because you're of that social class. But the tools you use, you see this a lot actually as a parallel in Japan. You see the ninja warriors with their rice flails and things like that. These are farm tools because the peasantry wasn't allowed to own weapons, so they had to use farm tools, adopting, sharpening a bit here and there, and then learning techniques on how to use them. And I think this would be the same in the Viking Age. Peasants' weapons, it tends to be sounding like here we're denigrating it. No, these are everyday people. Majority of us today would be in that situation had we lived in the Dark Ages, because you weren't allowed to have weapons. Because the elite who tying you to the land don't want you armed as well as they are, or getting expertise in that. But you'd be expertise in these kind of tools that you handle every day. So anyway, basically that's a thumbnail sketch about Viking, Dark Age weaponry. Hello there, it's me, Egil Thorson, back again. Last video I spoke about was peasants' weapons. Well, it was put to me, what happens if you've got a little bit more coin and whilst you're still a peasant, but you're better off? Well, let's look at some examples. Last time we spoke about clubs and things. Now, around the farm, an adze, or I think this is more like a hoe actually. Either way, a whack round the head with this will ruin your day. More common was this. This is a hedge trimmer, actually introduced by the Romans of all people, and you can either take the handle off and it's a big knife, or more likely swing it around, figure of eights. Either way, you wouldn't want to come into contact with that. Then of course we have what every farm would have, the axe. Different sizes, different, I mean this is a fair representation of a bearded axe, but an ordinary domestic axe will do the job just as well, and it gives you that sense of protection that other weapons may not. Most farms, or farms, would have an axe. Very useful. Then of course, as freemen, you'd have the knife. I'm reliably informed there's very few references to it being called a scramasax. There's different types, but this is quite large for the time. It's more like a war weapon, and I think it's probably fairer to say the smaller knives would be used. Or maybe you're very lucky and you've got this. It's more like a machete, again another type of sax or knife. Very much like a sword, a lot less expense to make, and maybe you'd be given this by your lord for past services. It's not what a high-class warrior would have, but I'm sure we'll cover that at a later date. But this is more realistic for the sort of everyday person. In fact, even more so is this. Even with this, I wouldn't like to have to face anybody. Or this, which is a very thin piece of steel, could be used in the kitchen, could be used around the farm. Hey, if it kills cattle and slaughters animals, it'll kill people.
Watch that, it's sharp.
Yeah, it is sharp. Bruggy's just reminded me and I just found out. But yes, even that. Doesn't have to be graces, doesn't have to have inlays, as long as it does the job. And the job is kill the enemy. So, that basically covers your well-to-do peasantry. And if you have any questions about it, or you have something you wish to add to it, please let us know. Leave us a comment. We will get back to you. Bragi has a lot of work on, but he will get back to you. Today I'm going to speak about swords. Everybody seems to think that Vikings, you see them leaping ashore and everyone's got a sword. Well, it was an elitist weapon. You had to be a social class, probably aristocratic, to own a sword. It was phenomenally expensive. And even a humble sword like this would be the equivalent today of the top of the line Ferrari. But let's talk about the naming of the parts of the sword. We'll start from the top and work our way down. Here we have the pommel. This balances the blade, so when you want it to go there, it goes there. But also, if you're in close quarter, you have a shield wall, you can't use it like that, so you turn it round, bridge of the nose or in the centre of the skull, you do damage. If a horseman's riding by, turn it round, under the chin, his jaw's shattered. That means he's not paying attention to you. The crossguard or quillions. This is when you stab, your hand doesn't slide down the blade. And we come to the blade. The blade, this is a re-enactor's sword, so it's not sharp. This would have been sharp and the point a little bit pointier, because the sword in Viking times was a slashing weapon. It was considered quite effeminate to stab. You had to, it's a hacking movement. And of course the handle, wrapped round with leather, sometimes it's wooden and even ivory. So those are the parts of the sword. And we know then that only wealthy or aristocratic people could carry swords. So how can we tell a sword apart from anything else? Well, this, the pommel. This looks a bit like a loaf of bread. So that's a Danish sword. So I'll just put this one away. Ignore the blade on this, but the Norwegians went for triangular types of blade. And like everything else, things progress. Next on from this, we have Norman sword. This meant to be operated slightly longer from the back of a horse. Again, the pommel. In this case, knocking people down, and again, slashing. Put that one away. By about the 1200s, swords were worn mostly for fashion, and this is a typical example. Notice we have a cross on here, fine handle, nice cross guard, and it's more for fashion, but you could still get a nasty wound from this. So there we have the different types of sword. In this series you'll hear us talk about Vikings, Normans and Saxons. Now, let's go through this. Sax means knife. So the Saxons were the knife people. In Viking times, single-edged weapon. They came in various sizes. Here's one for eating, which most people who were free would have one of these. Notice the shape of the blade. It's the oldest type of blade known so far. So we just put that one away, put it down there. This is a larger one. This is more fighting one. And every farm would have something bigger or smaller than this. And this is like the sabatier. You chop your food up with it, you skin animals with it, and you fight with it. Now, when the men were away, the women would defend the farm. And I show people when I go to demonstrations how you can kill 3 people with 3 strokes on this. You've got to do it right-handed, of course I'm left-handed. So, wear it thus. You draw it out, it goes across the eyes. You turn it, the next man, down past his neck. Then sets you up, above the naughty bits and unzip it. 3 people, 3 strokes. It's things like that that keep you alive. But they came even bigger. Here's one example. A Langer-Sax, single-edged. Again, more like a machete. The Norwegian one, this is a fine piece of kit. The Langer-Sax or even Brita-Sax. Nice, handy weapon. Manoeuvrable, either hand, and again, a slashing weapon. But again, it's a single-edged sword. It's very effective. And as I said, it's more a chopping weapon, and that gives you greater manoeuvrability. You've got all kinds of movements you can do with that. A fine weapon. So basically that's a thumbnail sketch of the sword. There are varying differences in pommel style, as in everything else. So next time you see a Viking leaping ashore, be sure if you see him with a sword, he'll be of aristocratic rank. Until we meet again, farewell. Here's some close-ups. This is a Norwegian pommel, triangular in shape. Turn it around so you can all see gently. There you go. The next one. There we are. Looks a bit like a bishop's hat. Turn it round so you can see. Here we have a Norman type sword. Big meaty pommel on this one. Turn it round so you can see. There we go. Quick one up. Decorative sword, and if you notice, it has a cross on it. Handle of ivory. There we go. A bit of chasing around the bottom if you notice. Very fine sword for a fine officer. There we go. I'll show you some different handle materials while we're here. Here we have the leather handle on the Langer Sax. Or bone, which will be probably more common because there's more of it about. Notice the pattern on there. Just because you're poor doesn't mean to say you can't have a bit of style. And this one has got a turned wooden handle. Ergonomic, I believe, is the phrase. You can get a good grip on that. Again, it does the job. And for the poorest of the poor, an eating one. And this one's got a name on it, Rune Egil Thorsen, whoever he is. But it's a handy size for eating. And that brings me finally to this. Now the handle on this has got a cap of antler, and it has a dragon that's been burnt on it. The copper bands has got Egil scratched in. Needs a clean before you say it. But a handy tool nonetheless. Deadly. So that covers about everything. So, till we meet again. Bye.